Name suggestions for brewery startup. We are putting the finishing touches on our business plan for a production microbrewery and are now stuck on choosing a name. We have a few investors on board and it looks like we just found the last 20% of the capital. The next step is to form our LLC and find a brewery name that hasn't been taken already. Anyone have any ideas? We are leaning heavily towards focusing on Belgian-style beers because no other breweries in our local market are currently producing this style. Our beers and packaging will reflect a premium image and therefore we are looking for a classy name if possible. If I end up using your suggestion, I'll send you a case of our beer once we begin production. Cheers. Walloon. Austin Continental Export ACE Brewery LLC. With a premium label on every beer. Upperly Premium Lager Gold Blanc Select Premium Sour Bitter Select or All Belgian No Cattle. Bliss Belgian Brewery. Round Rock Premium Brews Weird City Brewery or Weird City Select Brews Borrelon Premium Brews Bitter Beer Brewery, Texas Style Belgian Beer. Thanks guys. Getting some good ideas on here. So far my favorites are Walloon or Wallonia Historical Belgian Significance Belgian Bliss. I also really like Weird City Brewing, but I guess I should have mentioned we will be in Houston. The market is getting very saturated in Austin, and we think Houston and Dallas will be the next cities for growth. I would talk to quite a few Belgians to get their input before making a final decision. Just off the top of my head there are quite a few Americans who dislike the French, not saying right or wrong, so using Walloon may not be the best move to start off with. There are quite a few in Belgium who do not like the Walloons, so there is another group who may be offended. I am sure you know the beer market better than I do. I do wonder if there are enough people who actually know Belgian beer as opposed to others for it to be the main selling point as well as dominate the name. Maybe painting yourself in a corner if you decide in the future to go with a seasonal beer which isn't really Belgian. If you are doing a local microbrewery, I think you should keep the local connection. It is always like try local brands, and works much better if your business scales. With that in mind, my suggestion would be to keep Austin, if that is where you are starting up, and add brewery, brews or something similar to that. When you got a brewery called for example Austin Brews, you can easily just add the product name to it. Indian Pale Ale from Austin Brews or Austin Brews Lager. So this I gather means that you will be producing product in-house, right? Or would you outsource, after all? That is a good point. I don't think most of our customers would even notice, but that's reason enough to avoid the name. Yes, we will be producing beer in-house. Thanks to the enthusiasm of a new investor, we are now doubling the size of our brew house, which should make growth much easier. We are hoping that our own brands will take off and we will reach production capacity on our own name, but if we don't, we can always outsource the remainder to local restaurants, bars, etc. Well, what really makes a beer Belgian is the yeast, which has a very unique flavor profile. We're definitely going to put our own twist on several of the styles, so they won't all be 100% Belgian in the strictest sense. As an example, we're planning a Belgian IPA that uses a ton of American flavor or aroma hops to please the hophead crowd. Another example might be a Belgian stout or another well-known style that simply uses a Belgian yeast strain instead. Thanks for all the feedback though, guys. It's definitely always appreciated. Curious, how much did this cost to start up? Not me. No, they're famous for chocolate, but don't even care about that. We'll just grab a Snickers bar. After this one, I had no need to read any further, but I did and still like it best. This name kicks so much ass, it's incredible. 1. You have the fancy long name to indicate prestige too? You have super brandable name, and cool for guys to order. Bring another round of Ace exclamation mark 3. And you have the dots, ACE, to make it distinguishable. It's a subtle but important spice, and with the graphic designer very cool. Maybe I could help if you ain't got one. A.C.E. For aces. Hell yeah, bring another round. I'm so thirsty for this beer right now, made by Aces for Aces. Stopping now before my brainstorming gets out of hand. Best beer I ever had was some Chinese brand a few months ago, no lie, and I had beers on all continents in dozens of countries. With microbrews you don't need to sound fancy. Some of the most popular brands have a metal or dark image. People who drink microbrews for the most part are laid-back people. Goose Island area of Chicago. 3 Floyds. I have no idea what that is. A reference to Brooklyn Dogfish Head, New Belgium. That sounds kind of fancy, but that's not how they market themes. Ulfsy could go on and on. Are you on Beer Advocate? Chinese brands? Do you know their name? Asian beers for the most part taste the same. IMO. The USA makes the best beers in the world, not even close. It's every bit of $1 million right now. A huge portion of the startup costs will go to the purchase of the property and construction of our building. We are lucky to have found the right people. QFT, America doesn't have the best reputation for quality in a lot of areas, but I definitely agree that we make the best beer in the world. Maybe we have too much free time on our hands to work on things like beer. $1 million. I can't even imagine investing that amount or close to it for a new company. May I ask what are projected net profits before taxes after 5 years? Not being nosy, just trying to figure how much people figure to make when investing larger amounts. I see franchises such as Panera Bread which require $1 to $2 million investment with a net worth of $7 million just to get started, and they project making $500K after 5 years. To me that seems so small for such a large investment. Thanks. First of all, I don't mind anybody being nosy at all. That's why I post here. To even get started, the brewing equipment itself costs $300, $400K plus. I would prefer to use our startup capital to invest in production capacity or equipment, but our investors are generally older, more conservative, and prefer investments in hard assets. After buying the land, constructing the warehouse, etc., I'm sure you can see how easily we hit $1 million. It is hard to say what our sales will be in 5 years. The few breweries in our area are experiencing explosive growth, and are now in the process of upgrading equipment. This is the reason we are looking to double our capacity from the start. I can tell you that we expect to do $600,000 in sales in our first year alone, and this is a conservative estimate. IMO. We could easily reach $3 million in sales if we operate at full capacity. Wow, that is some cojones for sure. As soon as I think of an idea that costs more than a couple grand to start, I just move on to the next one. I spent $150 to start my company, so I am definitely a small fry. Lol. Would you say 13% profit on sales an accurate figure I have seen for microbreweries? Definitely. It sounds really exciting, though, and I hope that we get progress updates. Those are some big numbers. I think the proper question is, why have those breweries seen explosive growth? What's the formula or key to it? Taste? Marketing? Both. It's a hot market. Sales for microbrews have been growing for years. I wish all my conservative estimates worked out. You will do well in Austin, and I hope you invite all of us to the opening party for a free round on the house. That is actually very close to what we expect, and typical from what we hear from the industry. You really seem to know your stuff. I will start a progress thread once I get situated back in the US. There is a 4 to 6 month lag time between now and when we get the equipment. There should be plenty of stuff going on with the build-out, so I can post anything interesting that goes on with that. Unfortunately, Quite a few breweries have opened up over the last few years in Austin, so we have decided to go after the Houston market. If anyone is around the Houston area when we open up, we'll have more beer than you can drink. You haven't seen Aussies drink, then? I have a few times when we were in Whistler, BC a few months ago. Though for some reason, I can't remember the experience too well. SMX6:SMX6:SMX6. Microbrews are exploding where I am, Ontario, Canada as well. I know of a few breweries that opened up and I don't think they cost close to $1 million to start up just based on what I've read about their stories. They may have a much smaller scale than yours though, more like nanobreweries. One I can think of is Broadhead. They kept scaling up their garage homebrew setups until it started getting serious. Then they rented a small space, bought some slightly larger equipment, and went to town on it. I think they've slowly been upgrading pieces as their sales grow. Very bootstrapped. Not saying it hasn't been done, but it definitely limits your potential growth significantly. It takes just as long to brew 5 gallons as it does 500,000, so labor just becomes too much of your unit cost on the nano scale. You can get away with a smaller system if you start a brewpub and sell. Retail margins are naturally a lot higher, but in Texas that currently means you can only sell in-house. If the law was the same as other beer-friendly states like Oregon, Colorado, etc., we might have gone that route and expanded once demand was there. However, considering that literally every recent micro startup in Houston has had to upgrade capacity in their first 2 years, we figured we'd jump right in at 30 BBLs, 930 gallons per batch, which is still really small for the beer industry. The other problem with a brewpub in Texas at least is you have to have food, and generally everyone starting a brewpub does so in addition to a full-scale restaurant. I don't want to have anything to do with the restaurant side of things, since we know nothing about the business. The risk is much higher for brewpubs. I believe I've read stats that they fail at over twice the rate of production breweries. Related to an abbey, the finest Belgian beers are produced by monks who keep their mouth quiet for 364 days a year, working non-stop and only taking 1 day off. See West Vlitteren for example. As a fellow aspiring beer entrepreneur, congrats on getting this far and taking the plunge. I am in the process of opening a brewpub in NC myself, but am still working on finding investors and capital. I'm sure you know the challenges of funding such a capital-intensive business. If you don't mind me asking, are you planning to do your own distribution or go through a distributor? Spindletop, the well that changed the world. Fluidum, Houston's finest. I'd like to try the final product, whatever name you choose. Call it Liege. I love Belgian beer. I can't even believe that people drink this domestic beer like Budweiser that tastes like urine. I'm thinking what you name the brewery doesn't really matter regarding quality or style of beer you're brewing. My example is a Belgian-style brewer here in Maine called a Lagash. What does the name mean? Nothing. It's the name of a town in Maine of about 1,000 people. But they make outstanding beers, some of them commanding more than $20 or bottle. Pick a name you like and let the quality of your product determine how it is classified by the masses. CK. I would suggest working on your message, then pick a name based on that. If your message is cool and refreshing, something lake, something river, warm and comfortable, something forest, something tavern. That sort of thing.